The lunch rush had just begun at a small burger joint on the corner of Maple and Fifth. The kind of place where the smell of sizzling beef and toasted buns could lure anyone from a block away. Behind the counter, employees scrambled to keep up with the growing line of impatient customers, all while the old neon sign flickered faintly above the door. At the end of the counter stood a woman in her mid-50s, her arms crossed tightly across her chest and her lips pursed like she was about to deliver a lecture. Her name was Karen, and she was already unhappy. Karen had come in with an air of self-importance, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor as she inspected the menu like it was written to personally offend her. She wanted everything to be exactly how she liked it: extra pickles, no lettuce, light mayo, the bun slightly toasted but not burned. She repeated the order twice to the cashier, a young girl barely out of high school, who smiled nervously and nodded. But to Karen, that smile wasn't reassuring, it was threatening. It meant someone might make a mistake, and Karen was ready to pounce the moment it happened. When her number was finally called, Karen snatched the paper bag off the counter like she was disarming a bomb. She stepped aside, opened the wrapper, and inspected the burger with forensic precision. It took all of 5 seconds for her face to twist into outrage. There it was, a single, harmless leaf of lettuce. "Excuse me," she barked, loud enough to make half the restaurant glance up. The cashier looked up nervously. "I said no lettuce. Does no one here listen? Do I need to teach you how to do your job?" The manager, a man named Raphael, approached quickly, hands raised in calm surrender. He offered to replace the burger immediately, but Karen wasn't interested in solutions, she wanted attention. She made a scene about customer service, about how young people these days were lazy and disrespectful, about how back in her day people took pride in their work. Every word dripped with condescension. By now, the customers had started whispering among themselves. Some rolled their eyes, others filmed discreetly. Karen's tirade showed no sign of stopping. When the replacement burger finally arrived, Raphael handed it over politely, but Karen wasn't satisfied. She opened it right there again, checking it as though the kitchen had committed another personal offense. The crowd went quiet. That's when the door chimed, and someone else stepped in. A small woman with sharp eyes, silver hair neatly pinned, and an expression of calm authority. No one noticed her at first, not until she stepped right behind Karen in line and cleared her throat softly. "Are you quite finished?" she asked, her tone dry but piercing. Karen turned, ready to unleash the same fury she'd given everyone else, but froze. Because standing there, in a dark blue jacket and with the unmistakable face seen by millions on TV, was none other than Judge Judy Ruling. For a brief moment, Karen blinked in disbelief. "Wait, are you?" "Yes," Judge Judy said simply. "Now, unless you plan to file an actual complaint in court, I suggest you stop badgering this poor staff and let them do their jobs." The entire restaurant fell silent. The young cashier's mouth dropped open. Raphael stood still, halfway between horror and relief. Even the people filming forgot to breathe. Karen, however, wasn't the type to back down easily, not even from a TV judge. "Oh, I see," Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "You think you can lecture me just because you're famous? This is none of your business. I paid for this food, and I expect it to be right." Judge Judy raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "You expect respect, but you give none. You could have simply asked for a correction, and these workers would have fixed it. Instead, you're humiliating them because you think you're entitled to perfection. That's not how the world works, ma'am." The tone was calm, but it hit Karen like a slap. The other customers murmured in agreement. Karen's cheeks flushed bright red. For the first time, she realized everyone in the restaurant wasn't on her side. They were enjoying watching her get verbally dismantled by the nation's most famous judge. Karen tried to regain control. "Look, lady, I don't need to be told how to behave by some TV personality. You might act tough on camera, but this isn't your courtroom." Judge Judy tilted her head slightly, smiling just enough to unsettle her. "No, it's not. But it doesn't take a courtroom to tell when someone's being rude, childish, and unreasonable." The audience, because that's what the restaurant had become, chuckled softly. One man clapped under his breath. Karen turned to glare at him. Oh, you think this is funny? You try getting the wrong order after waiting 20 minutes. You waited 8, Raphael muttered, trying not to smirk. Karen ignored him. She was shaking now, not from fear but from rage. You all think you can gang up on me? I'm the customer. I have rights. Judge Judy folded her arms, calm as ever. You have the right to common decency, and the right to leave if you're unhappy. Beyond that, you're just making a fool of yourself. That did it. Karen's pride couldn't take it anymore. Her hand tightened around the burger she'd been holding, the same one she'd just demanded be remade, and before anyone could stop her, she flung it straight toward Judge Judy. Gasps filled the room. The burger sailed through the air in slow motion, lettuce fluttering like confetti, the bun separating mid-flight. But Judy didn't even flinch. She simply took one step back, and the burger smacked against the floor, splattering ketchup near her shoes. The sound was wet and final. The silence afterward was deafening. The entire restaurant stared, the staff, the customers, even Raphael, who had frozen mid-step. Karen's chest heaved, adrenaline rushing through her veins. She had no idea what had just possessed her to do that. Judge Judy looked down at the ruined burger, then up at Karen. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened, that same steely glare that had silenced countless people on her show. Big mistake, she said quietly. Karen's stomach dropped. The words were so soft, yet somehow they carried more weight than all the shouting that had come before. Judge Judy reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and calmly dialed a number. Yes, I'd like to report an incident of assault, she said evenly. Yes, I'm still at the restaurant. No one's hurt, just someone who doesn't know how to behave in public. Karen's face went pale. Assault? It was just a burger. I didn't hit you. Judy's gaze was unwavering. Intent matters, not your aim. You threw food at someone, that's considered assault in most jurisdictions. Maybe you should have thought about that before acting like a child. The cashier covered her mouth in shock. A few customers muttered "oh damn" under their breath. The weight of what Karen had done finally started to settle in. She glanced around for sympathy, but no one offered any. Not a single person. Her voice trembled. You can't be serious. It was an accident. It wasn't, Judy cut in. You made a choice in anger. And now, you'll face the consequences. Karen's knees felt weak. Her hands trembled, fingers still greasy from the burger. She wanted to shout, to argue, to blame someone else, but the usual fire in her chest was gone. All she could feel was the crushing embarrassment of a room full of strangers staring at her like she was the villain in a bad movie. 10 seconds had passed since the burger left her hand, and she already regretted everything. The silence in the restaurant felt heavier than the smell of fried oil and ketchup lingering in the air. Karen's heart thudded so loudly she could barely hear herself think. Her mind spun, searching for some clever excuse, something that would make this all disappear. But Judge Judy was still standing there, phone in hand, calm as a stone in a storm. The people around them watched as if they were glued to their seats, too fascinated to even blink. The young cashier, still trembling, whispered to Raphael, "Should we, do something?" Raphael sighed. At this point, just let it play out. Karen's eyes darted between them. Don't you dare call the cops. This is ridiculous. It was just food, nobody got hurt. Judge Judy ended her call and looked directly at Karen. It's not about injury. It's about respect and accountability, two things you seem to lack. Karen's throat went dry. The weight of her own impulsive act was starting to crush her. The very same crowd that she had earlier scolded now stared at her with disgust. Some of them recorded her, others whispered and shook their heads. For the first time, Karen could feel her reputation crumbling before her eyes, even if these were strangers she'd never see again. After a few tense minutes, the distant sound of sirens began to approach. Karen's stomach knotted. This couldn't be real. She couldn't possibly be arrested over a stupid burger, could she? She turned back toward Judge Judy, desperate now. Look, I overreacted, okay? I shouldn't have thrown it. It was a mistake. Judy didn't respond right away. She was watching her with an expression that was more disappointed than angry. Everyone makes mistakes, she said finally. But not everyone takes responsibility for them. That's the difference between a grown woman and a spoiled child. Karen wanted to scream, but she couldn't. The words wouldn't come out. Her mind was a storm of regret and humiliation. She glanced down at the mess on the floor, her own tantrum reflected back at her in ketchup stains and crushed bread. The police arrived moments later, 2 officers walking in with the kind of calm authority that made the entire room fall silent. They were polite but firm, speaking first to Judge Judy, who explained what happened in her precise, deliberate way. She wasn't dramatic, wasn't emotional, she just told the truth. And somehow that made it all worse. One of the officers turned to Karen. Ma'am, is that correct? Did you throw this item at her? Karen's voice cracked. It wasn't at her, I just lost my temper. I didn't mean to actually hit anyone. Intent still counts, the officer said. That's considered simple assault. Technically a misdemeanor. Her mouth went dry. A misdemeanor? For a burger? Judge Judy spoke again, her voice even but sharp. You think laws don't apply just because you're upset? Actions have consequences, no matter how small you think they are. The officer asked for Karen's ID, and she fumbled to pull it out, her hands shaking. The whispers around her felt louder now, like echoes in her head. Someone muttered, "That's what happens when you act like a Karen," and the phrase stung more than she expected. The officer looked over her information, then exchanged a glance with his partner. "We're not going to arrest you, ma'am," he said finally. Karen exhaled in relief, tears welling in her eyes. "But you are going to be issued a citation for disorderly conduct. You'll have to appear in court." Her brief relief vanished. "Court? You've got to be kidding me." "No, ma'am," the officer said. "You're lucky no one was injured, or it could have been worse." Karen's chest burned with shame. The thought of having to stand before a judge, possibly even in front of the same Judge Judy who was now watching her silently, made her want to crawl into the floor. The officer finished writing the citation and handed it to her. "Sign here," he said, and she obeyed, barely able to look up. The pen felt heavy in her hand, as though each letter of her name weighed her down with guilt. When she was done, the officers nodded to Raphael and left quietly, their radios crackling as they exited. For a moment, no one said a word. The restaurant buzzed faintly with the sound of the fryer, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the low chatter of people trying to process what they'd just seen. Karen stood frozen, still gripping the slip of paper, her eyes red. "I can't believe this," she muttered. "Over nothing." Judge Judy looked at her one last time. "It's not nothing. It's a lesson. You can walk through life thinking everyone owes you something, or you can grow up and realize you're not the only person in the room who matters." Karen's jaw trembled. "You don't know me." Judy gave a small, sad smile. "I don't have to. People show who they are when they're angry. That's when truth shows up." The words hit like stones. Karen turned away, unable to meet her eyes. She wanted to disappear, to erase the last 20 minutes from existence. She wanted to go back to being the one in control, the one everyone had to listen to. But now, she was just the woman who threw a burger at Judge Judy. As she picked up her purse and headed toward the door, a man near the counter called out sarcastically, "Hey, lady, next time try a salad. Might be safer." Laughter broke out, and Karen felt her face flush again. She didn't respond, she just kept walking, pushing the door open with trembling hands. Outside, the sunlight hit her face, but it didn't warm her. Everything felt colder now. The city moved around her like nothing had happened, but inside her chest was a hollow ache she couldn't shake. She walked quickly down the block, clutching the citation slip like it was a curse. Judge Judy remained inside the restaurant for a while longer, chatting briefly with the employees. She complimented them for handling the situation with patience and professionalism. "You did the right thing," she told Raphael. "You can't control how others behave, but you can control how you respond." The cashier smiled nervously. "I can't believe that just happened." "You were amazing, Judge." Judy chuckled softly. "Experience helps. I've seen worse, but I hope she learned something from this." Outside, Karen found a bench near the parking lot and sat down hard, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. She wasn't used to crying in public, she was used to winning arguments, not losing them. But this time, there was no one left to argue with. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a message from her friend, followed by a link. When she clicked it, her stomach dropped. It was already on social media. Someone had posted the video of the entire scene, captioned, "Karen throws burger at Judge Judy, instant karma." The clip was only a few minutes long, but in that short time, it showed everything: her shouting, her insults, the throw, and Judge Judy's calm reaction. The comments were brutal. Hundreds of strangers were calling her entitled, immature, embarrassing. Her name wasn't mentioned, but she knew it wouldn't take long for someone to find it. She turned off her phone, burying her face in her hands. For the first time, she felt the sting of her own actions, not just embarrassment, but the understanding that she'd done this to herself. No one had forced her to act that way. She'd let her pride take the wheel, and now she was paying for it. An older couple walked past her, whispering softly. She didn't catch all of it, but she heard enough. "That's the woman from the burger place." Her heart sank deeper. Karen sat there for nearly half an hour, watching people come and go. Each car horn, each laugh from a nearby cafe, felt like another reminder that the world was moving on, but she was stuck, trapped in her own humiliation. Eventually, she stood up, brushed the crumbs off her clothes, and started walking toward her car. Her reflection in the window looked older, smaller somehow. She wasn't sure when she'd started becoming this person, the one who exploded over small inconveniences, who treated strangers like enemies. But for the first time in years, she wanted to change. As she opened her car door, she looked back toward the restaurant. Through the glass, she could still see Judge Judy talking calmly with the staff. There was no anger, no ego, just composure. The sight made Karen's throat tighten. She whispered to herself, "I really messed up this time." Then she got in the car, started the engine, and drove away, not realizing that her story was far from over. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Karen's life. The viral video of her meltdown had spread far beyond her city. It had been shared, mocked, and commented on thousands of times. Her friends stopped calling. Her coworkers avoided her in the break room. Even her teenage son, embarrassed by the attention, barely spoke to her at dinner. Every time she walked into a grocery store or went out in public, she could feel the stares, people recognizing her from that one humiliating moment that had defined her entire existence. At first, she tried to justify it to herself. "People overreact online," she'd mutter while scrolling through the comments, her jaw tight. "They don't know the full story." But deep down, she knew they did. The video didn't lie. It showed every second, the yelling, the entitlement, the throw. No amount of excuses could erase what she'd done. The court summons arrived 2 weeks later, neatly folded in her mailbox. When she opened it, her hands trembled. The date was set for the following Tuesday. It wasn't a major case, just a misdemeanor hearing for disorderly conduct and public disturbance, but to Karen, it might as well have been a capital trial. She barely slept that night. The morning of the hearing, she stood in front of her mirror, trying to fix her hair, but nothing looked right. No matter how she brushed it, she still saw the same woman from the video, angry, petty, red-faced. She sighed, put on her plain navy blouse, and grabbed her purse. The courthouse was smaller than she expected, quiet, clean, almost peaceful. She sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, tapping her foot nervously. Around her were a few other people waiting for their cases, a teenager with a skateboard, a man in a suit scrolling his phone, a young mother clutching a toddler. When her name was finally called, her heart jumped into her throat. She stood up, her legs heavy, and walked inside. The room was modest, the judge's bench, the flags, the rows of benches for the audience. But when she looked up, she froze. Sitting behind the bench, wearing her signature black robe, was none other than Judge Judy Ruling. For a moment, Karen thought she was hallucinating. But the courtroom murmured quietly, everyone knew who she was. Judge Judy had agreed to oversee a handful of local misdemeanor hearings as part of a community initiative. It was supposed to be routine. But for Karen, it felt like fate. Her stomach twisted as she stood there, unable to speak. Judge Judy looked down at the paperwork, then up at her. There was no surprise on her face, only recognition. "Well," Judy said finally, her tone measured, "this is quite the coincidence." Karen swallowed hard. I didn't know you'd be." "Life's full of surprises," Judy interrupted gently. "Especially when our choices come back to meet us." The bailiff instructed Karen to step forward. She did, her knees weak. The clerk read out the charge, disorderly conduct. Karen barely heard it over the sound of her pounding heartbeat. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward. "Ms. Miller, I understand this charge stems from an incident at a restaurant earlier this month. Would you like to explain your side of the story?" Karen took a deep breath. Every instinct told her to defend herself, to minimize it, to make excuses. But when she looked into Judge Judy's eyes, she saw no malice there, only truth. For the first time in years, Karen didn't want to fight. She wanted to be honest. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I lost my temper. The food order wasn't right, and I let it get to me. I yelled at people who didn't deserve it. I threw the burger. I shouldn't have." The courtroom was silent except for her voice. She hesitated, then continued. "I embarrassed myself. I embarrassed my family. I've been humiliated ever since. But honestly, I think I needed it. I didn't realize how bad I'd gotten, how mean I could be when things didn't go my way." Judge Judy studied her carefully. "That's an unusually honest admission. Most people who stand there try to justify what they did." Karen looked down at her hands. "I tried that. It didn't help. I've watched that video more times than I want to admit, and every time I see it, I hate what I see. I thought I was just standing up for myself, but I was bullying people." The words hung in the air. For the first time, she didn't feel defensive. She just felt tired, tired of being angry, tired of trying to be right all the time. Judy nodded slowly. "It takes some courage to admit that." Karen blinked back tears. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "To you, to the people in that restaurant, to everyone I hurt. I wish I could take it back, but I can't." Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. "No, you can't. But you can learn from it. And maybe make sure it never happens again." Karen nodded. "I will. I promise." There was a long pause. Judy folded her hands. "I'm not going to impose a fine today. Instead, I'm assigning you to 20 hours of community service, preferably somewhere that will remind you what real hard work looks like. Perhaps a soup kitchen or a shelter." Karen's eyes widened. "Thank you," she said quickly. "Don't thank me," Judy replied, her tone sharp but kind. "Make it count. Use it to become someone better. You're not the worst person I've seen, but you can't keep walking through life thinking the world owes you something. You owe others kindness. Respect. Start there." Karen nodded again, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand." "Good," Judy said. "Case dismissed." The gavel came down with a sharp tap. It was over. But as Karen left the courtroom, she didn't feel angry or embarrassed anymore. She felt lighter. The following weekend, she began her community service at a local homeless shelter. It was her first time volunteering anywhere. At first, she was awkward, unsure how to talk to the people who came in for meals. But the other volunteers were kind, patient, and didn't treat her like a viral villain. Slowly, she found herself opening up. She spent hours serving soup, wiping tables, folding clothes. And with each task, something inside her began to shift. She watched people who had nothing say thank you with genuine warmth. She saw the way small kindnesses, a smile, a warm plate of food, could brighten someone's entire day. It humbled her in ways she hadn't expected. One evening, after finishing her shift, she sat outside the shelter watching the sunset. A fellow volunteer, a gray-haired man named Tom, sat beside her. "You did good today," he said. Karen smiled faintly. "I used to think I was above this kind of thing," she admitted. "Like I didn't have time for it. But now, I think I needed it more than anyone." Tom nodded knowingly. "Sometimes life has to knock us down a peg before we figure out who we really are." She laughed softly. "Yeah. Judge Judy made sure of that." Over the next few months, Karen kept volunteering, long after her required hours were complete. The people at the shelter began to greet her by name, and she started to find joy in the simple things again: conversations, laughter, gratitude. She even reconnected with her son, who had watched her transformation with quiet pride. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. It was from the courthouse. Inside was a short note, handwritten on crisp stationery. "Ms. Miller, I was informed of your completion of community service. I'm glad to hear you took it seriously. People can change, but only when they choose to. I hope you continue to choose wisely. Judge Judith Scheindlin." Karen read it twice, then smiled. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was acknowledgement, proof that she'd started to become the person she wanted to be. Months later, she walked into the same burger joint on Maple and Fifth. The place looked exactly as it had before, but she felt different. The cashier at the counter wasn't the same girl as before, but she still smiled brightly. "Hi there. What can I get for you today?" Karen smiled back. "Just a regular cheeseburger, please." "And thank you." She sat by the window as she waited, quietly observing the lunch crowd, people chatting, laughing, kids nibbling fries. When her order came, she unwrapped it slowly, and this time, she didn't inspect it. She took one bite and smiled. It wasn't perfect. The bun was a little too soft, and there was a bit more ketchup than she liked. But instead of complaining, she simply ate, grateful for the meal, grateful for the chance to start over. As she finished, she caught her reflection in the window, not the angry, red-faced woman from the video, but someone calmer, kinder, more at peace. She whispered softly, "Never again." Outside, the afternoon sun bathed the street in gold, and for the first time in a long while, Karen didn't feel like the world owed her anything. She felt thankful just to be a part of it.